Hey, everybody, this is Jason Wilson with the Curious About Cannabis podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in once again. So, today we're going to be talking about DNA testing to better understand your endocannabinoid system. A topic that is very fascinating to me, and I didn't even know there were companies out there trying to tackle this yet until recently. But I'm here with Robert Brown from Greenway DNA. Robert, thanks so much for being willing to come on the podcast and to talk about this very interesting subject.
Of course. Thank you for having me. Always happy to spread the word and let people know that there's really some great advances going on.
Yeah, and it's really funny and really timely that in some of my like workshops and seminars that I teach, this topic has come up where people have asked, is there a way that I can just do a DNA test or something and find out, what products are going to be, better or more likely to be better, that sort of thing. And I always was just like, I'm sure eventually we'll get there, but I haven't seen anything like that. And then on LinkedIn, I'm browsing around and somehow I just happened to come across Greenway DNA, and I was like, well, I got to talk to these guys and see what's going on. So, can you explain a little bit what is it that you do, and what is your mission, I guess?
Absolutely. The first thing I'll say is I spent a lot of time in the first part of my cannabis industry experience in and around dispensaries, and in California we called them the collective
Yep.
models. And even now when I go into them from time to time, you could sit there if you listen for 5 or 10 minutes, and the most asked question I ever hear is, how much do I take? So this is a huge problem, and you hit the nail on the head. And that's really our goal, is to start bridging the gap between two functions of this. One is the patient doctor, understanding that we can put medicine and patients together and really have some transparency so that they're equipped for it. A lot of times when we're going in now, they're recommending drugs that there isn't a real possibility for us to understand the side effect list alone, how
Yeah.
much the drug is really capable of doing. So that's really the overarching mission of that, right? Is to try to get
Yeah.
that out there. So what we did is we took, pharmacogenetics is been around for a long time. People understanding how their genes interact with things on various levels, and the science has been there for quite a long time, and the human genome has now been mapped out for some time, and the efficacy and the way that that's happened is, it used to be millions of dollars to map the human
Yeah.
genome. Now we're looking at, for $150, you can go out and get our test, and it's going to get you not the entire genome, but it's really going to get you where you need to be from an endocannabinoid perspective. So we've identified initially 20 genes and about 40 different gene variants associated with receptors, with your metabolism, different enzymes, how that works. And then we're able to produce a recommended dosage off of there for THC and CBD.
Wow, that's super fascinating. And how, I mean, I guess to kind of back up some, how did this kind of all come together? Where did this idea originate, and what did that process look like for trying to, make this a reality?
So it's funny that you ask. We really are a scientific company. We're really focusing on a clinical approach and trying to do everything that way. But the story itself started in a really humble way. Of, one of our other co-founders, his grandmother was suffering from Parkinson's, and
Mm,
they were trying various things. Nothing was working. The side effects were astronomical and debilitating. To be blunt,
yeah,
it's like you're trying to corral something, but at the same time you're adding on all these other things. It's really difficult. So this conversation led to one of our other co-founders, which is Ry Wagner, who's a longtime geneticist, on the clinical side of things, and worked through education in different fields in that way. And they started discussing, cannabis, and why isn't there
yeah,
a way to be able to dose this stuff properly? And that really just kind of kicked everything off. And it took about 3 years of work and really getting an algorithm together, and the gene identification together to put this in place. And that's where we are. And at the tip of the spear too. I mean, I think we really have a lot more to go here. There's
yeah,
going to be so much more information coming out. We are looking at identifying not only the CBD and THC, but
yeah.
there are 132, I think, other substantive cannabinoids that are in and around this thing from various ways. So
Yeah, that was definitely something that I thought about when I saw this product. Is I was like, this is probably just the very beginning of something that's going to evolve for quite a long time. As I mean, I've mentioned it multiple times on the podcast now, but it's like we have tsunami waves of cannabis and cannabinoid science research coming out now, especially as laws continue to kind of loosen up and everything. And so, as we learn from all of that, I imagine we'll see this technology go in pretty interesting directions.
Agreed. I was actually on a webinar this morning for the Center for Medicinal Cannabis Research and the UCLA Cannabis Initiative,
Hmm.
which is out of UCLA.
Yeah.
And they're doing all kinds of different studies right now with rheumatoid arthritis. Various places are looking at PTSD. There's just so many things. I was actually joking with my wife the other day. I would love to be able to sit and watch TV at night and see an ad come on for a medication, and the side effects are dry mouth,
Right.
and that's it. There's no potential to die on top of trying to fix your rheumatoid arthritis. So
Right, yeah. Dry mouth, some mild forgetfulness and appetite stimulation.
right, yeah. Brought to you by Cheese. I mean, it's so yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. And what does it look like? When someone uses one of these kits, is it very similar to like I've done a ancestry DNA test, some time back with ancestry.com, very similar to like 23andMe and all of that. Is that kind of the general approach from a user perspective on how the kit works?
Absolutely. So we try to make it as simple as possible. Again, really trying to incorporate the patient, the ideals of that into it. So, one of the other things I think is medicine gets complicated, understanding how
Yep.
you get your testing and all these different things. So it is akin to the 23andMe test. It comes in a small box. It's a simple tube that we actually collect a saliva sample
Mhm.
because the way that we do it is sequencing. We don't actually use a swab. We do full DNA sequencing, which is again a bit more clinical and much more accurate than the typical way that you would do like a swab test. Which is based around SNPs.
Yeah.
So again, a little bit different. But yeah, so you spit in the tube, you put it back in the box, and you send it off. We've got about a 45 question questionnaire that you go online, and basically is called the activation, where we gather various amounts of information down to right and left-handedness, which,
Oh.
believe it or not, actually plays into the DNA analysis. So.
Oh wow, that's fascinating. And then what is the so they spit in this tube and they do this questionnaire and everything. How long does it usually take to get those results back, and how is that data communicated?
Sure. So we look about 4 weeks typically. We're always
Hmm.
trying to improve that process, but again, with the DNA sequencing, it just takes
Yeah.
some time, and then our analyzation after that. And then what you'll do is you'll get an emailed report back. Um, which, by the way, if anyone's listening, please go to greenwaydna.com. You can see a sample report there and kind of explain what I'm about to tell you now. But the first part of that is about 16 pages. The first page is real simple. It's got two big boxes: THC, CBD. It tells you what you need of each,
Mhm.
and those things are recommended to take together. And then it kind of goes down from there into a little bit more of a breakdown on the variants that you've got. We put together one sentence explanations of each of those variants to try to again help bridge the gap between
Yeah.
science and the layman that might not see that stuff. And then we go down a little further and explains the receptors, what the variants are, where their roles are in the body, and kind of how they work within your system. And then from there, it gets a little bit even deeper into something that you can bring in and share with your doctor, and they're going to be able to take
Nice.
that from a clinical level and analyze that. So again, bridging the gap, right? We can bring
Yep.
the patient's knowledge level up with the doctor's knowledge level, and they've got a place to create a really generous conversation around health and wellness.
Right. And a big part of this, going back to the founder story and everything else, is trying to save precious time and resources during this process of trying to understand whether cannabis or cannabinoid therapeutics are going to be useful or not, and if so, in what context. I think that's something that's very underappreciated. Just that the value of time when trying to figure these things out, and money. I mean, let's be real too. People can waste a lot of money on products that don't work or are just not appropriate for whatever their condition is.
Very true. Very true. So one of the studies that we found was a study by Hello MD, which is back in 2017, and they had stated that on average they're looking at 6 months and around $3,000 for people to find the dosage that works for them.
Oh, wow.
So this creates kind of a myriad of issues right down the line, and the first one is obvious, like you were saying, you've got time, so you're trying to fix, or help assist an ailment that you've got. Time is not really on your side,
Yeah.
especially if you're in chronic pain or sleeplessness. I'm someone that suffers from insomnia, and my day-to-day activities, which are typically 12 to 14-hour days, lack of sleep doesn't help any of that at all. Um, and then we're looking at, okay, so a first time cannabis user comes in, and they're interested about this, maybe a little skeptical, and they're trying this with no dosage regime or understanding of how their body works. So 3 weeks in, they're going to say, you know what, this isn't working for me. I don't know what's wrong, and they're going to give up, and they're not going to go for it, and they're going to go right back to opioids or other sort of pharma drugs that are not as easy on the body as
Yeah.
one would like them to be. So um, it's it's really an interesting concept to kind of put in place. And again, I think that empowering people to understand what their body needs is the way that we've got to go forward with all of our approaches, and that's going to change medicine.
Yeah, I mean, all of this just reminds me of a common theme that's come up a lot of times when I do interviews with clinicians and other folks kind of working around the clinical side of cannabis. Is that one thing that medical cannabis is really pushing is this idea of individualized medicine. And certainly, what we're talking about here with this kind of genetic testing is kind of the epitome of that, of like, let's look at your unique, genetic information, try to understand what sort of pitfalls you might be sort of predisposed to, and how we can navigate those things. Which is it's super super fascinating, and it just shows, it's taken a while. Like you said, the Human Genome Project, like we've gone from, this technology, just decreasing in massive orders of magnitude to become accessible. And now we're stepping into this kind of brave new world of medicine where instead of relying on just studies that give you information about how an average patient population may react to a drug, which doesn't necessarily mean anything for an individual person because you don't know where you fall in this, sort of
Right.
representation of the patient group. It really allows you to go further and really individualize every approach, which that's something I'm just extremely excited about and passionate about. I think that's definitely the way forward, and I think we're still in the sort of infancy stages of that. But certainly, I look forward to a future where you go to a doctor and the first thing they do is scan you to see, like, okay, let's look at your genetic information, let's look at how your body's expressing that genetic potential right now based on chemical markers and things, and let's marry that data together, get a profile of you as a person. Now we approach therapeutics with all of that information in hand. So that's really
Right.
cool that you're playing a part in that.
Yeah, and you touched on a really great point. It's kind of amazing to me that this isn't a common practice, even outside of the conversation around cannabis.
Yeah.
We've got people coming in, and we're just talking about your weight. Well, my metabolism and your metabolism could be vastly different. So what they say every 2 to 4 hours could really be through my system in an hour potentially.
Yep.
Again, not a pharmacist, but considering what I know about
Yeah. It's
how
true.
our test runs, I mean, everybody's different. So, and body weight, while it's a factor in looking at these things, it's not the factor in looking at things. There's like a metabolic body weight that you
Hmm.
need to look at. How are we metabolizing these things? And that's again one of the big proponents of or one of the things we're looking at with this test is how can you provide that. So the fact that they're not doing that on a level much outside of cannabis to me is a it's just a stark reminder of kind of how far behind we really are
Yes.
with again personalized medicine and really helping people understand what they might need.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it demonstrates a almost a lack of creativity in a sense, because if we were to put resources into building these technologies to utilize them to their really fullest potential in this way. I mean, it's something we could do very quickly. We have the technology is there, like the pieces of the puzzle are there. It's just a matter of putting them in place. And unfortunately, there hasn't been a big push, but it's like slowly moving. You can see slowly in like broad mainstream culture, people are recognizing these issues and recognizing the importance of individualized medicine and everything. And it's just one of those things that it's always going to be frustrating, just how slow that change happens in the moment. Um, and I don't know if this gets into proprietary stuff. If it does, just let me know, and that's no problem. But do you foresee a future where this kit um, provides suggestions for more than just like THC or CBD or even cannabinoid dosage, but just focusing on the endocannabinoid system, things like dietary suggestions that would partner with someone's particular sort of endocannabinoid system, sort of genetic profile, or even like certain, so you have diet, exercise, all, even dietary supplements, vitamin supplementation,
Mhm.
that sort of thing, way beyond cannabinoids.
So it does exist. That's not something that we're going to be doing.
Hmm.
One of our focuses. Right now we're looking at pain, anxiety, and insomnia or
Gotcha.
sleep
Okay.
conditions. And the reason that we're focused on those initially is there's the most data and research about
Yep.
those three things and understanding that. Um, and what our approach is let's measure out what we're doing. Let's make sure that we're not only have the proper data behind that, but that we're providing things that are about the endocannabinoid system or plant-based medicine in general.
Yeah.
There's some interesting conversations that are moving forward, not only through our industry but other industries about psychedelics
Yep.
and different effects that has. And that's something that we're keeping a close eye on as well. But we're not going to be doing anything with outside of that, like again, any of the nutritional aspects of it. And we've been approached trying to add those things, and I think a lot of people are going in that direction, kind of offering this broad thing,
Mhm.
and it's appealing from an economic standpoint. People obviously you want to, oh, I'm going to pay this money, I get all this information, but at the end of the day, we want to focus on this and really keep our laser focus on how we're going to be coupling the endocannabinoid system with people, what cannabis looks like, and again, plant-based medicine on a whole, not getting into the herbs inside of it, but again, just
Mhm.
from cannabis, looking at psilocybin, other psychedelics, how are those things going to really help? And you touched on it earlier, mental health is a big part of that as well. And how can we approach that? So we're going to keep everything focused. We don't have any plans on stretching it out of there. There is some great people working on it and some great data on it. It's just not the place that we're going to play.
Yeah, no, and that makes sense, and it's actually kind of a little reassuring because I think one thing that is underappreciated around like genetics work in general is how hard it is to put together these robust platforms to validate data and make sense of it and try to extract meaningful, information from it that you can apply. And so, trying to stack just a whole bunch of stuff in there all of a sudden, the layers of complexity that would add to just trying to make sure that what you're delivering to a consumer is like reliable, it gets to be unreal. So that's probably for the best that you're hyper focused on a certain aspect of it to make sure that it's very reliable, and that you don't stretch yourselves too thin, especially this early into the game with this kind of technology. Well, that's
Right.
cool. And where does your interest particularly come from in all of this, and how did you get involved with Greenway DNA?
Another great story.
Yeah.
I started getting involved in around 2010. I was living in Los Angeles. Started again working in and around cannabis in very small forms. Had a friend of mine that was again suffering from a cancer diagnosis, fairly far along and fairly painful, and started looking at again the things that they were doing, and I wasn't involved as closely as I wanted to be. Obviously, there was family that was really helping them out, but on the outside looking in, it's just you watch someone going through this, and there's just you're helpless already. But the fact that they're trying all these things that aren't there, and you know, starting to look at cannabis and understanding that there's a way that's not going to provide, again, a lot of those side effects and doing those things. So I started trying to interject and say, hey, let's look at these things. You should go investigate that.
Yeah.
Talk with your doctor about it. Well, 2010, the doctors just really weren't having
Yeah.
that. Anyway, short story long, I started really getting into it. I started learning how to grow really well. Developed my own. I started owning several grow operations of my own. Um, Opened a small retail location. And then once things started to change around 2016, we started really seeing that the laws were going to
Yeah.
start going into recreational. I started looking at other avenues that might be better for me, just because the economy of that and the scale that it was going to
Yes.
get just wasn't an area that I was going to be in. Consequently, was flying back from Monterey to LA, and got stuck for about 4.5 hours on the bus ride out of LA with a guy who was the CLO of this new company, Greenway DNA. And he said, hey, we need somebody that knows actually about cannabis. We've got scientists, we've got lawyers. We don't have anybody that understands cannabis. And I said, I'd love to do it. And flash, forward, 4 years, here we are. And
Wow.
it's going great. Yeah.
That's yeah, wow. That's so serendipitous. I just just this ride and conversation brings you here. I definitely don't blame you. I mean, stepping into the regulated market in California requires a certain level of commitment and just fortitude that
Right, right.
is very challenging. I mean, I being in Oregon and just having gone through legalization out here, which is so tiny compared to California, that was and has been so chaotic, such a roller coaster. I can only imagine what it's like throughout California. I mean, I have plenty of friends all throughout California that have told me all sorts of crazy stories of what all's been going on as things have been kind of trying to find their equilibrium as
Right.
all
And
of the
and
laws have come
there's a
through.
yeah, and there's a broader view too. I mean, I like to think as I'm looking back on this, I tried to widen my lens quite a bit, and that required looking. You know, these laws are great, and the states are. I love the fact that we've come as far as we have,
Yeah.
although still handcuffed. When we're looking
Yep.
at other markets, you start looking at Germany or the EU. Even if you go over on the East Coast, the way that people address cannabis, the way they look at cannabis is much different. It's
Yes.
really more of a medicinal focus versus the recreational like we are here. So, how can we provide, or how can I be involved and provide the most effective, use of my time in cannabis? It wasn't, growing plants or trying to evolve that. I think it was much more on a broad scale. And I've been really lucky to run into some amazing people and work with some of the smartest people that I've met in and around the industry that are really pushing forward this thought of how can we change the world through cannabis and or again plant-based medications.
Totally. And how have the kits in general been received? Have you been sort of coordinating with certain like clinicians and that sort of thing to keep your finger on the pulse of kind of how they're being used?
Absolutely, yeah, we're definitely working with that. We in the last year we brought on Dr. Janice Knox,
Oh, nice.
who I'm
Yeah.
not sure if you're familiar with. She's on
Yeah.
our advisory board.
Yeah. She's come on the podcast before.
Yeah, yeah. Their family in general, the Knox docs,
Yeah.
just good people doing great stuff with it. Janice has had again her finger on the pulse of a lot of things, including the psilocybin stuff up in Oregon and decriminalization up there, which is fantastic. So, and then also Dr. Sandra Carrillo, who's down in Latin America, we brought her on as well. So, we're really looking at working closely with people in the field, and that's a lot of our focus now is on doctors' offices, getting it in the hands of that. We don't really focus on getting into the dispensaries. We're really looking at the doctors' models and trying to get people from a broader scale, because the educational hurdle that this
Yes.
presents is pretty vast. And people, even now, you talk to people that don't understand what CBD is, um, people that think that reducing pain with cannabis is smoking so much pot that you can't feel your face, right? And it's just not the case. I mean, I don't think people really realize, but an overabundance of THC is actually going to create inflammation, can actually
Yeah.
induce pain. So you've got to be really careful, and the data that we've collected so far, the amount of THC that's required for most people so far, and again, everybody's different.
Yeah,
Personalized
yeah,
medicine is not one size fits all. Is we're talking point something of a milligram of THC, point zero something on most cases. So you it's a misnomer to think that you can just get as high as you want to and go down there. So what can we do to change that? And that's education, and working with people that understand the body and understand how to present these things. So absolutely focusing on doctors and looking at this again from a clinical perspective is our focus.
yeah, yeah. No, absolutely, and that's good that it really encourages that um, information sharing between the user and the clinician, and to figure all of that out, because one of my next questions was going to be what are some potential like misunderstandings about the kit that people that engage it might have. I know just from doing like ancestry testing that a lot of times people have all sorts of misconceptions around what their data means or what the kit might be able to tell them. So I guess just to prime people if they're thinking about doing this, what will it tell you, and what will it certainly not tell you that people maybe may not quite understand?
Right. So what will it tell you? So first of all, again, we're looking at identifying the genes and the gene variants. So the one good thing is you're going to understand a little bit more about your genome and some of those things that exist in there. And one of the things about the variants that we're looking at is they cross over.
Yeah,
Um, we only have so many genes and so many variants. And again, just in general, our body's made up of so much fill in the blank. And within there, only certain things are going to operate and be able to occupy certain receptors, things like that. So we're going to give you some information about that. And some of those gene variants have present an understanding about a potential for addiction to all sorts of things, not just cannabis. Potential for, how your body transmits or produces, I'm sorry, how it processes cannabis in general, right? So are you someone that is going to have a high sensitivity to THC? Or are you someone that's going to have a low sensitivity to THC? So it can it kind of presents you with a really interesting opportunity. And as someone that was a previous recreational user, which I've kind of gotten away with that, especially since once I got the test done, I really focused on using it for what I needed to.
yeah,
I touched on it earlier. I have a problem with insomnia. It's horrible, and anxiety for that matter. So these things have really helped me find a balance. Um, and getting away from using it recreationally was one of the keys to that. Um, it's not just numbing your body; it's really focusing on that. One of the biggest misnomers I have is, especially when we were in dispensaries. Oh, so this is going to tell me how much I need to get high. Yeah, it's not gonna do that. In fact, you're the only one that can really do that. You know what I
right,
mean? It's a psychoactive effect.
right. Yeah, it's
So
subjective.
it's subjective, right? So that's not what it's going to tell you. I think there's a lot of miscommunication around DNA in general. What people are
Mhm.
collecting it for? What are they using
Ah,
it
that's a good
for?
point. Yes, yeah,
And one of the things we like to make sure everybody knows is you own this stuff. We don't own it. All it takes is an email or a letter, and we'll destroy the sample. So it's not something that we use. We don't sell any data. We don't do anything like that. We do internally use this to understand and better exemplify our research and try to get a more understanding about what's out there. And as we go through it, more of that data is always going to help our research. But that's definitely something that people are worried about. And there's been issues in the past with other companies that have had to do that. But
yeah,
I think by and large, it's getting much better. I think people are really understanding, hey, this is a widely used thing. Data is much more secure than it probably ever has been in the past. And that's one of the things we really focus on. Again, patient focus, right? Customer centric approach, try to make things that are not only easy to read, but also to make sure that you guys understand that you're important to us. Your well-being, your health, your wellness is important to us too. We're not there with you, but we're trying to present this kit to help you find a better place to live your life and a much more enjoyable way to do that.
yeah. No, that's a really really good point that I'm glad you brought up, because there is so much um, skepticism and cynicism, particularly in the cannabis space around genetics companies, particularly over things that have happened in the past few years. particularly breeders, have been really, really skeptical. But it's renewed this conversation around what are you know companies doing with information and genetics. So I really, really appreciate that. And a question that came to mind while you were talking about that is it possible if someone has already done a DNA test, like I did one years ago, and I've got my DNA file, is it possible to send that to you and have you run it without having to do a DNA extraction again?
So the short answer is no. And while I don't know specifically what test you got, a lot of times what people have done is asked, "Hey, can I import my
Mm.
23andMe data?" Well, 23andMe to identify like your ancestry roots or things like that, they look at about 20% of what we're looking at. So
Gotcha. Okay.
80% of that data is missing on there, and we just don't. It's really doing a disservice to the client to start pulling in other things. We want to run this through from a clinical perspective, and I know I keep harping on that, but it's really the important
Yeah,
point
it's
of
important.
what we're looking at, the way we're looking at it. And to do that, you've got to run through that DNA sequencing, and we've got to make sure we've got all of our factors in check when we're looking at that. And just like any scientific data, you want to make sure you're covering all your bases and you understand all the ins and outs of it, so you're providing the most accurate piece of information that you can.
Yeah, yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. And it's kind of what I figured, because I knew that depending on what service and when you did it, because some of these things have been
Right.
operating for so long. Um, yeah, who knows like what data is in those files? So that's kind of what I figured, but I felt like it'd be worth asking. And going back to the clinical stuff, because I meant to follow up with this. What has been the feedback from clinicians that have used this? Have they mentioned any notable kind of like situations, case studies, or anything where they've started to see how this is affecting their patients?
So one of the big things that we've covered in so far is well, it's twofold. Really, is one is when you present it, most doctors are like, "Oh God, I'm so glad this exists. I
Yeah.
didn't even understand this exists." So it provides a great position to have a conversation from.
Yep.
So again, let's just say that the skeptical patient comes in and they don't really understand cannabis, and they're really not necessarily on board, but they've had enough information to at least ask some questions about it. So now you can say, hey, you know what, this isn't going to be a guessing game. This isn't going to be me hoping to find you the right thing. Let's take this test. Let's see what you need for these things. And so it provides a great starting point for a conversation, but it also provides those people that are when they're not really, they think that they've got it under control. I'm
Yeah.
familiar with cannabis. I've been using it since
Yep.
I was 15 years old. I know, and this isn't working or this isn't that. Well, okay, I see where you might think that or why you feel that way. Let's take this test. This is going to provide you some scientific data for that. So it's like it sort of backs them up, gives them a nice way to lean back and say, hey, it's not just me, it's not just my education or my background. There's a scientific study of the DNA in your body telling you what you need.
Yeah.
So that's really a huge piece for them. And the other part of that is it just covers on a wide range of that. I guess it's really the best way to
Yeah.
put it. It really provides them a way to be able to have these conversations and to be able to move forth with that.
And after someone has done a test, and as the company continues to grow and the technology evolves, will any future sort of revisions of algorithms and expansions of the technology affect prior test results? Like, will people potentially see their data change over time, or is it something that they might want to like follow up in a few years or something and see if anything has changed? Um,
So, oh, I'm sorry.
oh
Continue.
no, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. So I guess I have to answer that in twofold. One is we do so the saliva sample that we collect is about 2 milliliters,
Hmm.
if I'm not mistaken, which is quite enough, more than enough we need for the test. So we actually freeze the rest of that and
Oh,
store it.
gotcha. Okay.
Um, because what's going to happen is, again, we're only looking at three things right now, and this is going to expand exponentially as we
Yeah.
pull in other minor cannabinoids, as we get more data and research. Once the U.S. Opens up the ability to test or we start working with people outside the US that are looking at these things, and we can identify ailments and how those work with, you know, different cannabinoids, not to mention the evolution of terpenes,
Yep.
and or, you know, once you can actually get around solidifying a strain, because, you know, one of the other things, and forgive me, I'm going to get off on a
No,
tangent a
no,
little
go
bit,
for
but
it.
people
That's
always
great.
think, you know, it's the strain. Oh, this is going to tell me what strain I need. And I actually forgot to mention that to you earlier, but
Yeah, that's a good one.
you know, for those of you that don't know about cannabis, you know, Jason and I can each grow the same seed in our home, with different lights or different nutrients or anything like that, and we're going to have a completely different plant production there. So you can't go into a dispensary in even one side of town to the other side of town and necessarily hope you're going to get the exact same strain just because it's got the same name on it.
Yeah.
So working to identify those, really coming from a tissue culture perspective and making sure that things are created correctly and grown correctly, and me being able to do that is going to be a whole other aspect of this, you know. But
Absolutely.
we are looking, we're looking at growing that thing. It's got, we have to expand. There's much more to do here. Our work has just begun, which I think cannabis in general, our work has just
Yes.
begun. um, so yeah, so we look at, being able to keep that on file. Again, you can call and destroy it whenever you'd like, but the opportunity is for, as these things come about, you can call and say, hey, I'd like to get tested for X,
Ah,
or,
I see.
you know,
Yeah.
I'm worried about this cannabinoid, is this going to help me? And you can revisit it. Now I will say that genetically, our genetics don't change. You know, our profile is going to be the same. What will happen is you may have to titrate your dose up or down, depending on, you know, the receptors or how much we've saturated those, and that data is still coming out, so
Yep.
it's a little bit too early to talk about. But you know, it's already been shown through the psychedelic market. People are talking about mushrooms, you know, when you're getting into a large dose, you know, titrating that back on day one, and then day three you can move back up to where you were. So, you know, as that data comes out, we'll be able to know more about that. But there may be some small titrations, of your dosage, because we're going to get you right there. You're standing next to what you need, but on a given day, your metabolism might be
Yep.
different, what you've ingested might be different. So you might want to play with it. But overall, no, you're not going to need to change from year to year.
Okay, cool. And something I forgot to ask was how specific are the dosage recommendations that that the results put out? Because you were saying that sometimes it comes down to like half a milligram or less. So how specific? I don't have it in front of me right now, but um,
That's okay.
yeah.
Yeah. So typically what we're seeing, and I'll tell you that it's, you know, like I think my dosage for anxiety was like 0.025 milligrams of CBD and zero point 0.1 milligram of THC.
Hmm.
So we get pretty granular with it,
Yeah.
from a perspective of like how the layman would view it. I will tell you that everything we've gotten so far, all the feedback we've gotten, and from people that know their dosage, they've called back different doctors and things like that and said, "Man, you guys were actually within 0.01 milligram of what I was already taking."
Wow.
You know, so it's there. We're working, and this is another question that's going to come up, and I'll just jump right into it. Is what's the efficacy, right? Have you guys done clinical trials? Well, we're in the
Sure.
process of doing that now. It's really difficult, you know. We've only launched about maybe just under a year ago. Took us about 3 years, 2.5 years to get the science really dialed in and go through our testing and understand that. So we're working on all those things. We've got a lot of stuff in the works, which is really exciting. Um, and again, we're expanding our network. We're getting people involved, people like yourself that are talking about it, you know, universities, doctors, people that are really interested in providing a better way to heal, and we are the first step in that process.
Yeah, to just to have more tools to work with to navigate all of this better is just, yeah, so important. And that's so funny that people are like, yeah, you got it within like a hundredth of a milligram. That's pretty cool. And do the
Yeah,
results assume a certain administration method? Like, is it assuming that you're taking it orally or sublingually or anything like that, or is there any sort of tie-in to the consumption method?
that's a great question. And I'll tell you what, there's a couple things, um, about that. Is So we start talking about absorption. You start talking about the
Right.
first pass effect, which I'm sure that you're familiar with. As things go through your liver, it gets broken down. So what gets in your bloodstream is very different. So the bioavailability is something that I talk about a lot, and it's something on the forefront of how we're looking at these things. Um, I will say that recent data has actually shown me that I've been reading is that the patches that people put on, the transdermal patches, are actually the most bioavailable way. Still getting my coffee in, sorry.
No worries.
The
Yeah.
most bioavailable way of getting that into your body. But what we do is we've got some highlights on there that this is kind of, sublingually taking tinctures. Those are really the things that are going to be the best way to not only measure your dose, but it's going to be the fastest way to kind of get into your bloodstream if you're not doing a patch. So we don't tell people how to do that yet. I don't think there's enough data around it, although we're working on it. And then you also have to look at the breakdown of that. So people that are smoking, I know people love it, and it's a really popular way to ingest cannabis. But the reality is while it's going to hit you right away, it may only last, for maybe two
Right.
to 4 hours, depending on your body. Sublingually, you're taking things that are, based around different lipids or fat-based cells. They're going to stay inside of your body quite a bit longer and actually spread out the length of time that those things are working. So I always recommend those types of things. And to touch a little bit more on a previous thing, and I forgot to mention earlier, is that one of the other things we're going to be able to tell you is, or that you can kind of see through your genes is, hey, if you've got a potential gene and you're talking to your doctor, hopefully they're going to be able to say, hey, your body doesn't metabolize olive oil as well as it would canola oil, or you might
Ah,
have, so understanding how your body reacts to the methods that you're ingesting is another thing that can come up through your genetic variants.
that's really fascinating. And then that can help you figure out, if you're honed in on, okay, I want to do some sort of vegetable oil, food oil based consumption method. Yeah, is it going to be coconut oil? Is it going to be olive oil? Is it going to be butter? What's it need to be? That's pretty cool. That's a interesting thought that I hadn't really considered. But that makes perfect sense because you're trying to understand just how your body's metabolizing these things, how it's absorbing, um,
Right.
and it's all
A-
interconnected.
And another reason to really stay hyper focused on what you're putting in your body, there are a million CBD products out there right now, and focusing on someone that's got the research behind it, that's going to show you um, that they've done all the testing on there, not only for the basic stuff, heavy metals and things like that, but how who's testing to tell you that this is how much CBD is in there, or how much CBG or CBN. I mean, this is all new stuff. So you've really got to do your research and due diligence on who you're dealing with, and make sure that these reputable companies are there and they're standing behind what they're selling to you, because we can tell you, hey, we can recommend a dosage, but if you're taking something that doesn't have any CBD in it, it's
Yes.
not going to do anything for you. So
Yeah, and unfortunately, that problem has uh, it's not much better than it has been, and it's transformed in really, really weird ways. There's really weird products out there that, on the hemp market, particularly, that can have or not have all sorts of different things in them that are not what you would expect.
right,
Which is disappointing, and
right,
hopefully the industry starts to get that under control because certainly, already there's been this interesting reaction to delta 8 THC, um,
right.
and so we're going to see more and more of that, um, which which kind of leads me into some of my closing thoughts here, which are, what are you kind of looking forward to as far as the future of the industry goes and the future of medical cannabis goes, and just you personally, like what are you kind of excited about and kind of hopeful to see as everything progresses from here.
Sure. So personally, one of the things that's close to my heart is the veterans.
Mm,
I try to interact with as many veterans organizations and reach out to as many as I can. Um, you know, I while our test incorporates, again, pain, anxiety, insomnia, which are some of the borderline or underlying causes of PTSD. PTSD itself encompasses a wide array of
yeah.
things. It's very difficult to really get a handle on. But you know, I didn't serve in the military. Some of my family did, but I've just really I really want to be able to help in
Yeah,
that area as much as I can. And then even from there, I think looking at the afflictions that children are facing, I think that's another super important one. And parents are so dedicated to it, and they're so thankful for it that it's I've got a son, thankfully, hasn't doesn't have any issues, but I couldn't imagine.
yeah,
And so we've got to really focus on the needs of people, and how can we better serve those people. Creating drugs that cost, yes, it costs you $2 billion to make it, but does it need to be $4,000 for a prescription to go there? Do we need to make it unavailable in certain states?
right.
It doesn't make sense to me. So anyway, personally, those are two things that I really think about a lot. And I would encourage anyone that's involved in a veterans organizations or any sort of childhood afflictions or diseases, please always reach out. As I'm happy to move that along. But in general, wellness, right? We want to be
Yes,
able to change the paradigm of how people look at wellness, how they look at what they put in their bodies, and how we treat ourselves. There's no there's no reason to continue to think that the only way forward is with a drug that takes you 5 minutes to read off all of the side effects. And by the way, some of those are death.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Death. I just, and again, I saw the ad. It's rheumatoid arthritis. I just, it's bad. I know it's bad, but is it? I don't know. It's
I
just
mean,
really, it's really hurting.
and not just death, but also suicide too. I mean, that's something that blows my mind with a lot of, and I have a lot of personal connection to this because a lot of folks in my family struggle with different mental health issues, but a lot of the common antidepressants, antipsychotics, I mean, suicidal ideation is one of the potential side effects, and it's just one of these. It's a weird risk benefit analysis. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I saw a drug the other day that is an antidepressant to take with your other antidepressant.
right, right.
I, so I just don't understand that, and there's a better way to do it. And one of the one of the best ways to do this is to have an informed populace.
Yes,
If we
yes,
know what we're doing, and you can walk into a doctor's office and have a really honest conversation, and you can say, hey, I know what my body needs, or I know the direction I want to take, and I want you to come along with me on that journey, instead of them grabbing you by the hand and telling you where you need to go. I think that we're going to find ourselves in a much better place. So any 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 part of this that we can help change the conversation on and really change it back to empowering people's path to wellness, empowering your information, those are things that we're focused on. And excuse me, we can work together on it, by the way, too. This isn't a singular operation. This isn't
right.
us working by ourselves. This is everybody working together. I mean, whenever I'm on LinkedIn, like you were saying, I reach out to people, and I network because I want to talk to you. I want to
Yes,
stay close.
yeah,
Okay, we don't do the same thing, but let's work together on it. You might know someone that I need to know, or vice versa. I'm here to help. We're here to help. And that's just kind of our underlying goal, is how can we empower a better use of our time together.
yes, absolutely. I mean, then that's literally how we connected. Is I just sent a random message, on LinkedIn, just saying, I'm interested in what you do. I want to talk to you. Like that's literally. It's like I want to understand better what you're about and share that with other people, and it's just part of this like interesting interconnected shared journey that we're kind of all on and playing our parts. I really appreciate that perspective, and I love that you mentioned, you know, trying to push this model forward of healthcare where patient and clinician are working together on a journey together, like you said, um, that the patient is owning and really pushing forward, and the clinician is there as a facilitator and a guide and helping things come along, but not this kind of situation that we commonly have now where it's just sort of it's like, well, what's the textbook response to the symptom presentation? Or like, oh, you saw a drug ad on TV and you're telling me what drug you want to take. All right, let's try it and see what happens. um
Right.
that's like so much.
Right.
How direct consumer drug advertising is legal. I just in the United States, which is one of the few countries where it is legal, it just blows my mind because I feel like this shift towards a better model of healthcare would happen so much faster if we could just do away with direct consumer drug advertising.
Yeah.
It's just a weird situation when you're going to your doctor and telling them, like, let's have no discussion about anything about my life. Just here's a drug I saw on TV. Let me try it.
Right. Or what's your genetic profile?
Right. Like,
Okay, I want you to take one of these every 4 to 6 hours. My mom is 4'9", right? The same medication that you're going to say every
yep.
4 to 6 hours for her, it just blows my mind. It really does. It's the way that we approach these things, the way that we approach drugs, the way that we approach selling the drugs, creating the drugs, marketing the drugs. It's yeah. So a little pie in the sky, but at the end of the day, I think if we can all start thinking about this as a goal
Yeah.
and actively pursuing it individually, even if it's so much as asking the question or
Yes.
identifying it,
Yes.
hey, this is why I talk about anxiety. People don't talk about mental health in this
Yep.
country enough, and you know, this is something we need to discuss. How can we make this better?
Absolutely.
So
Yeah. And I totally agree. Mental health, and especially mental health in the context of cannabinoids, it seems to be like especially taboo. I mean, I've experienced that. I've got my own like anxiety, depression issues, and it you can talk about cannabis use for pain all day long, but when you start talking about treating other like psychological things, a lot of clinicians even like get very uncomfortable talking about that, especially because of just the sort of generic idea of like, well, no, you don't want to stimulate your CB1 receptors,
right,
and it's like, well,
right.
that's such a simplified idea. There's a lot more to it, but you're right.
Yeah. Listen, people need one of the main things we have to understand is, the endocannabinoid system's job is to create homeostasis in your body. It's to even everything out. And adding to that with cannabis is even everything out. It's not there to knock you on your butt. It's not there to,
Yeah,
it's there to eat. Your body can help itself, and that's why yoga is so good. That's
yeah,
why,
yeah, yeah,
supplements are good and exercise is good. It's like our body can help regulate when it's got enough of the things it needs to do, you know? I mean, vitamin D alone, I think can reduce, morbidity
yeah.
across all angles on its several facets. So we just need to focus on these things and how can we really look at our bodies working together and, and helping to heal ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the endocannabinoid system. I remember one researcher I talked to said it's kind of like the fine tuning knob of the
Right.
body. You know that it tries to smooth that picture out at the very end. And yeah, it's cool that to know that there are companies out there working on tools like this that are sort of the fine tuning knob for the fine tuning knob. It's like trying to figure out how much to turn the fine tuning knob to
Right.
get the picture clear. So that's
Right.
really cool. So yeah, Robert, thanks so much for being willing to come on and chat for the past hour. This has been really fun, and I really look forward to seeing how this all develops. I need to try the kit out and see what it tells me. It'd be very interesting because I've been a cannabis user for quite a long time. Medically, because I used to have a medical card long before legalization and everything.
Hmm.
And so it'd be very fascinating to see how the information translates to kind of what I've noticed about myself and that sort of thing. So maybe I'll have to get a kit and try that out and let people know what I learned from that. It could be an interesting experiment.
Absolutely, absolutely. Happy to do it. Yeah, it's everybody should know, information is power. So
Absolutely. Yep. That's the key. And before we sign off, let everybody know how to learn more about Greenway DNA. Let them know the website, and if you're on, I mean, I know you're on LinkedIn. If you're on other social media, I'll kind of hand the platform over to you for these last couple of minutes. Let people know whatever you want them to know.
absolutely. Yeah. So first foremost, greenwaydna.com. You can go there, take a look at the kit, kind of see how simple the process is. You can purchase it right there directly on the website. Makes it really easy. There is a sample report that you can download and take a look at. Kind of helps break down a little bit more about what you could expect to see and kind of how to disseminate that information. We're on social media, Instagram, Facebook. We're on LinkedIn as well. I do spend a lot of time on there, just again making connections, and um, just the amount of data that you're going to find, not only from ourselves but just other people that are on there, is staggering. I learn more, I think, on LinkedIn in a day than
Yes.
uh, most anything else. So we will be, probably heading out once things open up a little bit to go to different conferences and start looking at things like that. Again, probably more on the clinical level than your typical MJ Biz shows,
Oh
but
boy.
you know, yeah, please take a look. Is all I could say. We're here. We love feedback. We love questions, and anything we can do to help bolster the industry itself and wellness in general is welcomed.
Most excellent. All right, everybody. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. And yeah, if you're a clinician, particularly, I know there are a lot of clinicians that listen to this podcast. Yeah, if this is something that you try out, let me know how it goes. I'm really interested to track this and see how this tool gets applied. So yeah, thanks so much for listening. If you want to learn more about Curious About Cannabis, you can find us at cacpodcast.com, and we're also on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube. All right, everybody, stay curious and take it easy. Bye bye.